Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology, and this is the Aftershow. It is an open forum for those who want to continue the discussion from my first part of the book review for the text Ancient Egyptians Refute Afrocentrism by the tour guide, the Egyptian tour guide, Kyrllos Eskandar. And so, again, this is an open forum. And if you want to join the conversation live via the panel, the link is in the chat. And it is also pinned to the top if the chat kind of goes beyond what is normal. And you'll be able to still get in and give your viewpoints. So all that and more when we return in just a moment. Peace. And we are back. I want to thank each and every one of you who is joining us, live, and those who watched the video prior to for this particular discussion. And so, as stated earlier, this is an open forum, and we were again reviewing the first section of the book that is broken up into three sections titled Ancient Egyptians Refute Afrocentrism. This is an attempt by an Egyptian citizen who is of the mindset that African Americans in particular are trying to lay claim to ancient Egyptian history. And so he is trying to fight or provide arguments against several alleged claims that, he came across on Facebook, which includes that the ancient Egyptians were Black African people. So this author doesn't believe that the ancient Egyptians were Black, that Egypt is in Africa, and that Egypt has anything to do with Africa. And these are said explicitly in the text for which we are reviewing. So, of course, when we come across some of those other claims in the following chapters, I will be giving my commentary against it. And so I want to acknowledge and thank Sister Mika for joining the conversation, and Dasharab in the building. And I saw, at least I thought I saw, there she go, Dr. Mo in the building, Dr. Monica Lamb or Monica Lamb, because apparently we've been all saying it wrong. But shout out to you and everyone who has made themselves known in the chat. And it looks like we have at least two people on the panel, and I'm going to bring them in just a moment. First, want to thank all of the individuals who donated in the last show. And I want to also acknowledge Ahmad. He sent a Cash App donation instead of donating through the chat. And so it wouldn't show up there. So I just wanted to acknowledge Ahmad and thank him for his gracious donation to the channel. So without further ado, I want to bring on our two panelists. You can join in at any time for those of you who are watching in the chat, and I will bring you in. And so we have with us Elder Baba Flag, as we call him, Brother Flag, on the panel, all the way out in West Coast. So it should be starting their evening there. And we have an individual who goes by K_O. And want to welcome you. I'm not sure where you're located, but want to welcome you to the Mbonki.
Appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. I'm going to first go to Baba Flag and get his thoughts on the presentation and the arguments made. And then I'm going to go to you, KO, and then we can kind of round robin from there. And I'll look at the chat and see if there's any specific questions in the chat as well that we can address. But go ahead when you're ready.
So first of all, I just want to say Hotep and greetings to everybody on the panel. And secondly, I like to say, as always, I'm always so impressed with your ability to enunciate the names of so many people from the continent, man. I just really appreciate hearing that. Myself being a victim of miseducation of the Los Angeles city school system as a young Negro. Oh yeah, you misspoke when you called Obama a Negro president. He was too young to be a Negro. That's a classification that came on our birth certificates. But that aside, I really appreciate the fact that you not only address this most provocative title and relationship with what I experienced on my trips to Kemet as well, with some of the people there claiming what they are not, which you so eloquently and intellectually broke down for us. And it brought me to mind that the man in the hat, the one whose name I dare not speak because I don't have that much respect, enough respect to even call that name, but who has, from my perspective, a lot to do with this undue assault that we get from the less aware, the less enlightened people who come against us for no sound, rational, or moral reason. And so I just thank you for arming us with the information and coming against it straight ahead. And it's an arsenal that I utilize when I share with my community. So I salute you. I salute you, brother. Sorry.
I appreciate it greatly, and thank you for your kind words. I try my best, and there's more to come. And matter of fact, since we have a representative of ASCAC, or I should say another representative of ASCAC on the line, I want to invoke the name of the late Dr. Asa Hilliard. And there's a video that you can watch, and I'm gonna make it'll probably be a smaller video. It won't be nothing elaborate like I just did now, but just to take a few clips from this speech that he was doing at an ASCAC conference. The title of the video, I believe, is The Attack on Africans for Writing Their Own History. Right? Not sure if you've come across that particular video, or you may have been there. But, he addresses this because, of course, as we know, there's nothing new when it comes to, this attack on African scholars and Afrocentricity, African centeredness in particular. And so he provides, good strategies and certain things to think about. And it reminds me of this book that we're discussing here, reminds me of a comment that he says within the lecture when he's talking about how, because of the response that Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga had in the 1974 Cairo Symposium, that there was some other subsequent, not so many well known, like there was one in 95, 96 in Barcelona. Of course, Diop had passed by then, but Obenga was there, and other African scholars like Mubabinge Bilolo, Dr. Alain Anselin, and others, who took on a number of, European linguists and Egyptologists, continuing that conversation. And because of these professional debates and the like, that they are real hesitant to send any of the serious, so-called serious scholars, that they always send what Dr. Asa Hillier was saying in the lecture, these Rudy Poots, right? And he warned us not to get caught up trying to respond to each and every Rudy Poot, because it distracts us from doing what we need to be doing, and that is researching and publishing our work. And this is one of those texts where I know if Baba Hilliard was still here, he would be like, ignore it. But, we are in an age where, it's not enough of us in the visual media space providing counter intelligence in essence to this particular type of onslaught. And we have more and more pseudo folks online who don't know how to respond. So even though it's not worthy of a response, it's still, there's a whole generation or two who really don't know about a Nasa Hilliard, an ASCAC, a John Henry Clark, et cetera, and don't know about these previous conversations, because a lot of what he's talking about in this text, we've already been debunked, a very long time ago. So I felt, it's still, because the arguments are still there. This is a fight that we can never, we can never think is one per se. We know information wise it is one, but the intellectual enemies, so to speak, are relentless in their fight for misinformation. So at minimum, even though we, the more seasoned of us don't have to engage them directly, I still think it's our duty to provide, the layperson in the community, the communiversity, and in any, future upcoming scholars with the primary sources and arguments and things, so that if they feel the need to, while they own Facebook, since these are a response to Facebook posts, that they would have something, to kind of get their feet wet and learn how to argue and all that other good stuff. So,
well, if I may, Asar, I'd like to point out the fact that you're doing exactly what Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga and Asa and Baba Jetty, and that's what they trained us and taught us to do. Is what you did today. You faced it head on, and then you just laid out the information plain, and you let the information speak for itself, as we have been trained to let our ancestors speak for themselves through us. And you have taken up that staff, and I think you're doing an excellent job with bringing forth quivers, ammunition to place in our quiver, so to speak, for, like you say, the ones who may not be initiated or are just coming along. Was it's your turn, it's your time, and so you pick the targets, because, like I said, there's one whose name I dare not speak, but that's coming. But you also, like you pointed out in your presentation, those people, this is their culture. They've been doing it for how long? Decades? Hundreds of years? No, millennia. So we don't expect anything different. But you're the one. It's your responsibility. It's your obligation. It's your time to face those people. And I think you're doing it in the following the legacy of how the best way and the only way to do it is with the facts, with the truth, you know, and always leave room for the ancestors to do what they're going to do. And so until we get more of us going to commit itself, so they can have that that invigoration, where they can have that in their experience, that gives them a certain advantage, a certain sight, a certain tool, a certain mindset. And that's what you're doing. When they see this, they should be encouraged. One of the things should happen. They should be encouraged to go and see it firsthand for yourself, the primary information themselves. And that makes them that much more firmer in standing against these people, because they just got the information yesterday, Asar. They just got it yesterday. Mario Beatty, the president of ASCAC, graced the Western region, and one of the things he said about his speech is that Cheikh University, he was there earlier in the year, and he was with this European, and she brought out this long thing, and that I will get to you, about the impact of the so-called Afrocentrist scholars on Brazil. Prior to 1979, if I'm not mistaken, they had no understanding. They had no scholars. They had the only resource they got was us.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you're doing is important. Just pick your targets, man. Pick your targets, but load up, because we got work to do from May to June. May to June. So we're gonna be ready like we always are, but we're not gonna give power to them unnecessarily. We're too wise and experienced for that.
Indeed. Brother KO.
How's it going, man?
Peace and blessings.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, great. As always, great presentation. I also really appreciate how there's just some text, some ancient Egyptian text that kind of spoke about they're dealing with migration issues that I've never heard before. So that was kind of good to just hear. So it's always good when you do this, because you bring out new information that we haven't heard, a new perspective. But what I kind of find interesting, especially in that earlier part when you spoke of some of their comments from that YouTube video, and they were speaking about North Africa. It's just interesting how they ignore the historical record. Like there's a lot of history. I mean, even if you think about the Barbary Coast slave trade, right? They themselves said that they brought millions of Europeans into North Africa as slaves, particularly women, right? And at this same period of time, they were also bringing people from West Africa into North Africa, probably men and women. And then, so it's kind of like, where did all those people go? You know, like so
Exactly.
it's like they somehow they just don't remember, or like they ignore how they've come to be what they are today. But I think a lot of it has to do with there are certain cultures around the world where um their identity is in flux because of uh because of like some type of agenda or like some type of movement they're part of. Like for instance, um there's a lot of story of like, when Arabs come into a certain area, they'll conquer the area and then they'll subject the population, but they'll still obviously take women from the population. And so it's over time. If like let's say the Arabs come into Egypt, for example, Egypt I think was Christian at the time. Am I right? When the Arabs finally came in,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
the
Can you hear
Arabs
me?
will
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
right, yeah. So they'll subject all the people and say you guys have to be Muslim, and then they start taking wives from the native population, well, from whatever populations in Egypt at the time. And so that happened 1400 years ago. So over 1400 years, you guys have all been, subjected. Now you all have to be Muslim. And 1400 years passes by. Why would you think that you're going to be exactly what you were before then, especially if a new population comes in and is taking women from the population, Or like, why would you expect, why would you assume that you're the same thing when, um, you have people coming from Spain and from, Portugal and France, and they're being injected into your society, and you're a Muslim society in, let's say, Morocco or Algeria, for example, and at the same time, you're bringing women from Guinea and women from Senegal and women from like northern Nigeria, bringing them into your society, and then you're having children by them. How would you be just one thing that's been there for thousands of years? So I think there's a lot of, there are kind of victims, not say victims really, but they're products of the circumstance of the historical situations that happened, but they don't they can't understand what happened before that. And what's interesting is in modern day now, you're having people online in Turkey find out that they actually have, there's a lot of people in Turkey because they're Muslim and they're Turks. They believe that they've always been Turks. Some of them are finding out now, to their surprise, that some of them are partially Greek or partially Armenian or fully Greek. And they're wondering,
Mhm.
how is it that I'm Greek when I'm a Turk? I've been calling myself a Turk. But they don't realize 100 years ago when the empire fell, you guys said anybody else who's here who's not Muslim, you must be a Muslim. So if you're going to stay here, you need to convert to Islam. So they don't think about those historical circumstances, you know?
Indeed. And but it's we got to understand the dynamics of the Abrahamic religions themselves. They're proselytizing religions that attempt to erase the memory, the culture, the language, and of course the spiritual wisdom traditions of the people who they engage and conquer with. And they do this by various different strategies. Of course, the most extreme is through direct war in terms of violent war, conquering and the like. And the others involve like trade. Like if they control an aspect of trade, they'll require the people that are doing trade with them to become Muslims, so that and in this in of itself, in my opinion, personally, isn't bad, because what they're trying to achieve in that sense is that you and I operating by the same rules, that
Right.
we have the same culture, the same worldview and framework, to where we're doing trade, we have a basis in order to do that trade. So it becomes Islam becomes that framework. And so there are a lot of Africans, you'll read in the record and they'll try to use this. Well, they became Muslims non-violently. Well, they couldn't,
Right.
they don't know Arabic, they can't read the Quran, they're not evaluating the text and doing a historical analysis and on the Quran. They're just accepting Quran. It's like how when we sign up for something and we see there's some fine print and all that, and we just hurry up and click accept because we want the end product fast, right? Like
Right.
this is what a lot of Africans were doing because they just wanted access to trade. It was a way of social mobility and the like, right? And then
Right.
you have in some situations where the kings converted, and then it was a requirement for everybody under his rule to convert in the same way, just in the same way that Constantine did Christianity in Rome, right? And it became the religion of the Romans. It was used for political purposes. So there's many ways, but in none of the situations was it Africans went and did a serious analysis and study of the religion, of the text itself, to look for contradictions, strengths, and weaknesses, and decided that this was the true religion, and we got to drop our ancestors' way of life and language and clothing and get rid of all our artwork so we can become like the Arabs. And so what happens is in the first generations there is more so of a synchronism, right? Like there's still a hold on into the traditions, but then as you're synchronizing, you're not keeping those old institutions and societies that held the wisdom and the body of knowledge together, that would initiate new members into the societies who are the keepers and the holders of the culture. And so the following generations just grow up in Islam thinking that is all that it is. It's just like that here in America. So, the first converts to Christianity or whatnot, everything was syncretism. We're hiding everything under the banner of Christianity. It's just like the Native American, the quote Mardi Gras Indians in Louisiana. The original Mardi Gras Indians were voodoo practitioners, and to keep voodoo alive, because when France owned Louisiana, they still allowed them to keep their African religion. But once the Americans took over during the Louisiana Purchase, they, like the rest of the United States, they banned African religions. So they found ways to do syncretism, with the traditional voodoo and things, and they created the Mardi Gras Indians, other kind of insurance secret societies, and of course they integrated in the church. But of course, you don't have any open voodoo practitioners and the like, and over time less and less people are being initiated into it, and the younger generations are just being born into the Christianity, to the point now where the descendants of enslaved Africans are fully quote unquote Christian, and anything that is African associated, they want to disassociate themselves with it.
Right.
They want to denounce, right?
Yeah,
So the memory is lost. Now we got Negroes in the United States talking about they Native Americans, that they're Moors, that they're Hebrew Israelites, we're the lost tribe of Shabazz, anything but African. And so I can see that in other places around the world.
Can I speak
And
to
Asar, you know what's so interesting about it too, Asar? So if you take that whole dynamic that you just spelled out, it's like over like 4,000 years, because like you said, there was a time where the ancient Egyptians themselves were saying, hey, these Asiatics are like Egyptians too, they're just here, so that of them sharing the same the Asiatics adopting ancient Egyptian culture, that co-identity allows for people to start mixing with each other, and then
Isn't that
when the when and then when the country becomes Christianized thousands of years later, that allows anybody who's Christian from around the Levant and from Europe to also mix with those people when they come into the land. And then when the Muslims came, and then they make the whole country become Muslim by whatever means that you've explained, it allows the people, even if they look different, to mix with each other. And so over time, you have more and more people like, hey, it doesn't matter what we were before. We're all Muslim now. We're all Christian now, yada, yada. So we can just actually mate with each other, share traditions with each other. So whatever was before is totally blank, you know? And so they don't see that, which is you beautifully explained it. That type of dynamic is how they've come to sit in the country that they are in now, and they're saying, "Oh, we're from this," despite the fact that there's a lot of different groups of people that have come and under different banners have all blended together.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, brother. Bubba.
You know, at the beginning you said it wasn't such a bad idea when the people came together and under Islam to facilitate commerce, etc., correct?
It not Islam itself, in terms of the idea that we have a common framework in order to do business.
Yeah.
So that in itself. So if we like had I have a book idea I've had since like 2004 called Ma'at Business Philosophy, where we use Ma'at as the standard for doing business and writing up, you know, a system and a methodology and a kind of a standard way on how we conduct business, you know, saying as African-centered people, and how we can be of service to the community and the like, right? Like that would be a framework to operate under. So I'm not advocating saying that the Islam part was good, but just the concept itself. Because of course, when you're dealing with other groups, you're doing long distance trade, you know, you don't really have a grasp on how those people are. People may be shiesty and, you know, don't do good business because, you know, they don't look at you the same. And they're doing that from experience. Because, for example, I remember, and I hate to cut you off, and I'll let you continue. But this is very important, and this is the difference between the Arab and the African groups. There's this brother who was in the Nation of Islam in Houston, Texas, when I used to live there. And we used to always meet up at this place called Mocha Life. It was a black-owned coffee shop. And, you know, all kinds of different religious folks would, brothers would come there, and we would meet and have debates. So we've been doing this since, you know, the early 2000s, right? Like 2000, 2001. And, you know, he was telling me about, you know, the kind of the rules and the laws in Islam, to where they have it to where they can't be ruled. Like it's a law that you can't be ruled by non-Muslims. And also that you don't have to keep contracts with non-Muslims, right? So you can have an agreement, but because you are not a Muslim, they don't have to keep their word. So this is what he was saying, was like, this is the basis for why a lot of those treaties and stuff be broken in the Middle East, because all they're doing is they'll sign a treaty, but all they're doing is buying time so they can recruit and then can go back and attack again, because the other people are non-Muslims. They don't have to keep, you know, the contracts. They don't have to keep their word.
It's called
I'm sorry,
Takia.
say it again. Takia.
They call that
Yeah.
Takia, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if that is the case, then I can never trust anybody who's a Muslim, because as a non-Muslim, you know, whatever your word is, whatever we agree to, you can at last minute just say, you know what, I don't want to adhere to it because, you know, you're not Muslim, right? But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brother Flag.
No, you're absolutely right. I experience and I understand everything that you said. But that relates to whether you're talking about that's the same relationship that African Americans in this country had with the Europeans, with the white man, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said, the civil rights movement. I remember the young boy. They were praying at the city hall, and the sheriff told him, "You just saw unlawful assembly. You got to get out of here. You got to move." And the little boy, he was like 14 or 15, something like that, was leading the thing. He said, "But before we leave, we're doing civil disobedience, nonviolent civil disobedience. But before we move, before we comply, I would like to say a prayer." He said that, and the sheriff told him, he said, you ain't got time to say a prayer because your prayers don't get no further than the top of your hair. So this is how these people, whether they be the sheriff down in Mississippi during the civil rights movement, whether there be the people that came in from the north that you spoke of, that when the reporter came, he said they were indistinguishable from the Nubians, right? Am I correct?
That who was indistinguishable from the Nubians?
That when he went to when the Asiatics came and they mixed in, they became so entrenched that they were indistinguishable from the Nubians, yet they were not Nubians. That was part of your presentation.
Well, they didn't specifically say Nubians; they just said Egyptians.
Egyptians.
So
okay.
So
but I'm just saying that.
So there were so many of them that
they came.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. But you getting my point. My point is when they come among us, they can drape themselves to look like us, but if they're not African-centered, if they're not looking at Ma'at, if they're looking at the Quran, if they're one of the Abrahamics or the Asiatics, then they automatically demonize the African. And this is what's going on with these people, that guy that wrote that book, that pamphlet. He's living in Egypt. He calls himself an Egyptian, and he probably ain't even thought about this stuff until he heard of what the work that we were doing, that we were pointing out it straight up, and that other guy was telling him, "Look what they're doing, man. They're stealing your stuff." And that's why they weaponize these people with their lack of education on the subject, and they come with this racialized notion, and they demonize us, and this is what you have to deal with as a frontline scholar. It's your time. It's your turn.
There's a brother that came out of Sudan. I tried to interview him probably like a year or so ago, but where he was located, his internet connection just wasn't good, right? And matter of fact, it's because it wasn't his internet connection. I take that back. They were actually banned from using certain software to communicate out, right? And then due to the civil war in Sudan, he has since fled. And the last that I've seen him, he's him and his family, escaped to Ethiopia. So I believe that he's still there. But saying to say like those videos that or at least those screenshots that I showed before from the YouTube videos from the modern Egyptians, campaigning against us in the Hopi movement. When we were going to Egypt in 2022. Well, this summer, what's his name? Dr. Kamani. Why I want to say it's Kamani. No. dang it, he was just on. He's out of New York. He does the curriculum
You're not talking about.
scholarship.
You're not curriculum.
Yeah, he's a curriculum scholar, but he talks about ancient Egypt and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Dr. Kaba. That's what I mean.
Oh, okay.
If you're familiar, yeah.
How about
So
the cop? Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So
old soldier.
indeed. Well, they were trying to do to him what they did to us in Egypt. So they're showing. So the brother in Sudan was sent me a video clip of the of their conversation that they had online, and it showed clips of Dr. Kaba and some tourists or a group that he brought with him to Egypt. They were in the Cairo Museum, and so they have a whole campaign against the Afrocentrists, and so it's in Arabic, and they turn the captions off so that we can't. If you don't speak Arabic, it doesn't translate automatically. So I had him to kind of summarize what they were saying, right? And so he tell me, and I'm gonna read from my correspondence with him. And hold on one sec. And so he says, so the guy is interviewing another. So it's set up like a news station, right? So you have the news anchor, and he's interviewing somebody, and so there's the interviewer, and then there's the guest. So Brother Amru is responding. He says the guest says, Afrocentric or Afrocentricity was founded in USA as a rebellion. So the guest is trying to explain Afrocentricity. So the Afrocentricity
audience.
Is this yes, to an Egyptian audience.
Yes.
Yes, right. So the Afrocentricity was founded in the USA as a rebellion against slavery by Afro-American communities. They see ancient Egyptian civilization as a reference to Black people in the USA, only, he said, to overcome the hardship of slavery in the United States. They use some of the paintings in the walls to refer as Black people, like the picture of the god Osiris painted in black, to say that ancient Egyptians were Black. But what they don't know is that the Black color of Osiris represents a deeper meaning in ancient Egyptian spirituality regarding the afterlife and not the color of skin. And he adds, we don't have anything against African people, but this is not acceptable, he said. So notice the language that says, we don't have anything against African people. They're in Africa and don't see themselves as African.
That's a fact.
Right?
That's a fact. That's a fact.
And so,
they see themselves as their religion first. Some of them. Some. Yeah. Okay. And
I say most.
When I was most of them.
Well, I can't say most unless you meant most of them. I've been to Kemet twice. My last trip was in 2023. I interact with the people outside of the study tour with the community, right? And so one of the things I noticed is that the guy was very pleasant. We was talking a myriad of subjects, but I kept referring to sub-Saharan Africa. And I kept saying Black Africans. And he said, why do you keep saying Black Africans? I said, because there's a distinction that was made. I didn't make it. I said, I didn't make it, but I'm making that distinction so you know what I'm talking about specifically. And he said, I'm offended that you would say that you say Black Africans. And I said, okay, well, I don't mean to offend you, but I'm not going to stop saying it because that's how I express myself. And this is the point. And you need to come to that point, or then, you see what I'm saying? Now, that's what he said. But in their religion, they have a whole different relationship with the word Black.
Yeah.
So they have to overcome that. the same way my generation, when I was coming up, we had to overcome that. On my birth certificate, it says Negro. Okay? And so the
Yeah.
worst thing a black person could call you was black. Matter of fact, Richard Pryor even made references to it in the 70s. He said, you know, the guy that used to be, you know, he said, the guy talking about be black and be proud. He said, my parents said that nigga's crazy. So that's the way we had to. So this is not so distant. So when I have a so when the man in Egypt, when the Egyptian looked like one of my cousins, these people are color struck, just like you know what color struck is.
But you're talking about people that we would identify with black African people. What I'm talking about are those who do not have any kind of blackness whatsoever, as we like the author of this text. They like in this text, he's supposed to be a native Egyptian, but he says Africans as if there's somebody else and not him.
That's
what I'm saying.
That's how they believe.
So, exactly.
That's how they were raised. That's their culture. The same way that goes back, and I was going back to your presentation. You said when the Asiatics came in among the Egyptians, and the reporter was looking at him, he said, they're here, there's so many of them, they're mixed in. So he said it's hard to find an Egyptian, but he's looking at these people, they look like they blending in so much as Egyptians, except for the fact they don't identify with the ancients. They don't identify with the South. Are you understanding me?
Indeed.
So the same.
I want to finish this.
Is that Dr. Esau? Let me calm down. Is that brother Dr. Esau right there?
I don't know who that is. It just says O on the or I don't know if it's O or the number 0, but it looks like it's O. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say one thing. I'm sorry.
Hold on one second. I want to introduce O for now. If you could state your name, where you're from.
I don't know how that got on there. I normally go by the name Jose. I don't know how that got on there. So I have to change
Jose?
that. Yeah, Jose.
Jose, okay. Yes. So no problem. I'm gonna come back to you. I'm gonna finish this point, and then I'm gonna let the new person speak. I'm gonna come back to you, KO.
Okay, let me tie a bow in it. So basically what I'm saying is that person is more in need of being taught by you rather than assailed. It's a teachable moment. You pointed it out yourself, but what you just said. And so they're not that much different than a lot of us. Black Africanness, to be African, to be black is a state of mind. It's a state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so if they don't have it, we don't have to assail what them for not having it. We just put it out some more to them and show where they got things mixed up. Pan-Africanism and Afrocentricity didn't come as a result of what, slavery? No, not at all. It was we had access to the information. Our teachers had brought it and presented it to us. So the larger community got access to what formerly mostly was kept in the ivory towers of academia. And so we rose up. Some of us rose up and some of us running away. So thank you. Thank you for let me share that little piece.
No problem. Well, the TV presenter asked after the statement was made. The TV presenter asks, "Why is this so controversial?" Then the guest answers, "Because it escalated recently when they tried to make a conference in Aswan, but the Egyptian authority has stopped it." And so now he's referencing me and Hoppy and Obinga from the 2022 conference. So you can see that this is part of a larger conversation, but watch this. And so it says the last question. So the TV presenter, how can this ideology, meaning Afrocentricity, be stopped? Because taking legal actions can make people empathize with them. So what's the best way to deal with them? And then the guest responds, we have to fight ideologies with ideologies. We're not just talking locally, but we need to speak to the Western world in the USA, and we should make our own movies and documentaries to beat them in their own home. Right. So that was his response to the Afrocentric rigor, which counters the lies. And so, like, when I see this book written by him, it's part of their larger strategy. So they're using the government to try to keep Afrocentric scholars out of Egypt. Then they try these online bombardments with misinformation and attacking and flagging videos. They'll do that, and then of course.
Are you saying the guy that was on the TV is the same one who wrote this 75-page?
No, that's what I'm trying to tell you. That it's a concerted effort of people in Egypt in general. So the book is one venue that they're or one strategy that they're using, trying to put stuff in print. But of course, it's not scholarly, and they're not using their best scholars to make arguments, because of course the real scholars have something to lose if you put in a whole bunch of misinformation, in a particular text. You got to answer to that in terms of the community, right? But a tour guide does not. This is why Asa Hilliard was like, don't waste the energy fighting the poop butts, because they'll just throw their grandmother out of the house and have her write and say something. We're responding to the grandmother willy-nilly, right? And so you have this, it's an onslaught campaign, and this is the reason why I'm doing this series, because they have made it, in other words, they've waged war. They have declared war on Afrocentricity, African people writing about African history and the like. So, I have an upcoming discussion and talk titled Afro or Africology as a martial art. Right. So everything that I'm, going to be discussing and teaching, I'm teaching you how to fight in an old school kung fu style, like, how to do counter, how to, we use a 52 blocks in terms of scholarship and the like, right? Like this is the kinds of things that we're doing because of this onslaught of misinformation by these religious zealots who live in Egypt now, right? But I'll end there, and I'm gonna bring Jose Francis into the discussion. Peace and blessings. Welcome to the Immoral.
Good night, Brother Flag. How are you?
Yeah, hotel.
I want to point out something. They like to dismiss Afrocentrism and Afrocentric ideologies. But I recognize that when people who are Afrocentric, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, they come with information and scholarly arguments to prove their point, whether they get beat up or they get agreed with. Afrocentric scholars don't just talk out of, as my brother Jabari say, their nether region. So even if people disagree with Asar Imhotep, he does bring a scholarly point of view. So he's qualified to be right or to be wrong. There are people who are just talking. They're not qualified to even talk, much less be right. So as you say, we have to stop wasting energy on these little individuals who feel that there's something. When you check their background, they're from Turkey and someplace else. They wasn't even born there. That's exactly why he's even born in Egypt. He's Turkish or something. But he's mounting a whole campaign to beat up people. And if you ask him to look on the wall and read a word, he probably can't even read it. And they paid him $10,000 to do a tour of what? What did he do it? He can't read anything.
That part.
You understand? So we have to, we have to, even though we disagree, we have to come together and say, well, listen, we have to fight these people, because it's clear, whether we think they're black or not, the people on the wall, it's not Hamed and all of them. It's definitely not them. We know that. If you don't want to say they're black, it's not them. And we know what the Asiatics look like. And they look very, very distinguishable from other people. And they were hated in ancient Kemet because they were considered people of poor character. And you understand? We understand that. So we're not gonna let this guy come.
And I cited all the primary sources stating just that. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I know Asar Imhotep holds a controversial view.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Beat up on, but that's okay.
And we love it.
To hold
We love Asar for that.
Nobody.
And I like to fight, you know, and I'll be like, everybody who disagree, I'll be like, send me your best. Everybody wants to avoid the fight. I grew up fighting. That's all I know how to do. And it is interesting that people have these opinions and things, and they be threatening me, you know, with I'm going to get this such and such scholar, and I'd be like, get him. I'm ready. Let's have a conversation. They never bring them, right? Never. It is real interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But I just think the whole thing is very interesting, and I'm a person who's learning Medunetia, and to me, I think when you learn the language, your whole view changes, and it kind of messes up your childhood because the illusion that you have being a perfect place, you realize they was doing some things that that was a little extreme, like chopping off Asiatic hands and things like that. So it kind of messes up your view, in the sense of if you have this unrealistic view, because you realize things happen and they weren't perfect. And when I started to read, and I learned that, I was a little upset about it, because I had this view, and then I realized, they was a little militant. They wasn't all pretty and intellectual. You know, some people got hurt very badly.
May I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
May I ask you a quick question? Where are you from?
I'm from the U.S., but I'm living in Trinidad. So I've been there for 20 years, so my accent probably sounds crazy to you.
You're in Trinidad?
Yeah, I was just asking. You sound Ghanaian, so I was going to ask if you was from Ghana, because I'm like, you know, if your native language, you know, that's a good strategy. See, that's the advantage of the continental African scholars, because they speak their native languages, and once they start learning the skills of linguistics, when they're reading the ancient Egyptian text, they're like, wait a minute, this is my language. It sounds a little different, just like how you speak in English, and it has a Trinidadian accent to it. You know, you've been there so long, you picked up the accent. You know, you may say certain words a little differently, but you recognize it. You know, as an African American, I recognize the language English that you're speaking, even if it sounds a little different, you know. And then of course it'll really get different when you get into Jamaica and the like, but you still recognize it. And so it's the continental Africans, when they're reading the Medunetia, they're like, this, I have this word in my language. I say this phrase the exact same way. We have these same rituals. You know, I do this, you know, when we bury our elders, we do the same thing. And this is what we call it in our system, right? And those are the kinds of connections that strengthen. You know, I don't know if you were able to, you know, view the whole presentation, but I cited. I'm sorry,
I didn't watch it, actually. I'm going to go back and watch it. So I don't want to. That's why I didn't want to make any direct comments on what you said, because I didn't get a chance to watch it.
Again,
I'm going to go back and watch it.
Well, when you do, there's a slide where I'm citing Dr. Christopher Ehret, and he explicitly says that the culture and customs, like there's a lot of shared culture and customs with quote unquote Nilo-Saharan speakers, and that the core of ancient Egyptian from sub-Saharan Africa, right? But you have these Arabized, you know, Turkish descendants, you know, talking about there's no connection between ancient Egypt and Africa, right? Yeah. And these are the kinds of things that we're fighting. Sorry, go ahead.
But if they don't speak the language, how do they know that? How can they tell you what is the connection in the language or languages that they don't speak? They speak Arabic. So how do they know what the connection? They have no idea. They've been trying
hard to make a connection between Semitic languages and ancient Egyptian, and nothing systematic turns up every single time that they do it. But when we start comparing them West African and Central African languages, you find the exact words, exact phrases, you know, damn near 70% of the vocabulary in these languages, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
But Brother Jabari was saying something interesting. He said he went to Ghana and he was a student of the chief. And when he went there, they have some stones with Kemetic writing on it. and he said they performed some Kemetic rituals and spoke in their language, and he was able to understand what they were saying. Have you ever heard anything about that?
I can tell you
that
this.
Jabari.
He said
I'm sorry.
him and his wife went to Ghana and they were installed. He was installed as a chief and she was installed as a queen.
Okay.
And he said they told him a story about a Kemetic priest and some followers who ran from Kemet when Kemet fell and left some, and they have some tablets with Medu Neter writing on. And there were some people who were the caretakers, like de facto Kemetic priests, who were speaking to him in the language, and he was able to tell them what they were saying. He said they took care of it for so long, they didn't even know what they were saying. That's how long they took care of it. They forgot what the words meant, but they still performed.
I've heard that from James, Professor James Smalls. He's also initiated in Ghanaian wisdom tradition, in the Akan wisdom tradition. And you know, if you read Aye Kwame, what is his name? Aye Kwame Armah, the author of 2000 Seasons.
Yes, yes.
You know, he talks about, you know, he's from Ghana, and he talks about these oral traditions where that is spoken of as well. And I know for a fact that, you know, my Babalawo, who initiated me into Ifa, the person who initiated him, the late Dr. Apega, I met him twice. When we would have in our Ifa sessions, when we would have our private lessons, he was writing Medu Neter, and he taught Medu Neter, you know, and he talked about, you know, connections of certain priests who made it to Nigeria, and I've been able to corroborate that with actual archaeological evidence, right? But this is the stuff that they don't want to hear about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I share my story with my dear brother, Professor Smalls?
Go ahead.
In 2003, I took the African Heritage Pilgrimage Tour with Dr. Jeffries and Dr. Rosalind Jeffries and Professor Smalls. And during that tour, at a certain point, I was with Brother Smalls, and he said, "What's the matter, Brother Flag?" I said, "You know, all my life, I always wanted darker skin." And he said, "You always wanted dark skin? Why?" And I said, "I felt like I just wanted to be black. I wanted to be black. Somehow the way I felt it would make me, I wanted to be as African as I could be, and black was my image of that." He said, he said, "Brother Flag, tomorrow we're going to the northern region. And the people in the northern region are the same complexion as you. That brown brother that you showed, Asar, and that painting with that you used to show, put him juxtaposed him with Imhotep. The reddish brown complected person. That's what color my skin turns in when I'm in Ghana." And
my bad, I had my mic muted, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Paul says, he said, "We're going up there in 2 days. We're going to the northern region." He said, "And you're going to see the people who have the same complexion as you." He said, "They come from Kemet." He said, "They come from Kemet. They trace their lineage back to Kemet." He said, and many of them are they were of the priestly tribe when they were making their exodus. He said, they live in that region. And sure enough, when I got there, we were meeting with the chief, and while we were reading by the elders, waiting for the chief, the elders were standing against the wall, and my oldest son and I was standing there, and we both jaw dropped, and we looked at each other and looked over there. And I have a picture of the gentleman. He's exact image of my father. He just had on big, thick glasses, and my son and I just recognized him immediately when we saw him. So I'm just saying, we are all one African people. We may be in different places. We may be, and we are in different places all over this globe that is our home. And we're trying to reconnect, remember, and we're reconnecting. And the more you bring these programs like you did and the evidence you brought to refute these the slanders that these people are bringing, it's a healing salve, and it's also a connection, like reconnecting a 5,000 piece puzzle when you bring those elements together. And I just wanted to share that with you. You talking about? I thought he was brother Sar, brother. He wrote the African origin of the word. I'm in Esau, Dr. Esau, Professor Esau. I thought that's who you were, Jose, when I saw you.
Wow, that's a big compliment, but I'm nowhere near that man's level of skill at all. I'm a beginner, and I want to thank the community for not being too hard on me, because sometimes when you ask people for help, you get the help. You don't get the answer you want, you get the answer you need. But I
Okay.
want those who have helped me and have not discouraged me. But they do give those comments like maybe, you're going too far, and they try and pull you back nicely. So I just want people to know, if you ask people for help in the community, whether you know them or not, if you humble yourself, they will give you help. But sometimes you're gonna get an answer that you don't like. But it's all love. And I've never been discouraged from learning. But I've been told ever so politely, if you're gonna do it, let people know you're not an expert, and they give you those type of answers where maybe you need to calm down a little bit. You're getting too excited, you're going too far. And I can't accept that, because it's not done in public and it's done in love. So people need to keep their egos in check for 2 minutes, and sometimes ask for help. Because if you don't get embarrassed in private, you're gonna get embarrassed in public. And you don't want to come on one of these channels, especially one like this one, and say something stupid, because you're gonna get embarrassed.
Well, this is a platform, with brother Sar, with his Barry White tonal voice and his cool, laid back demeanor. He's gonna drop some heavy information on you, but he's gonna do it in a dignified way, not like some other platforms. Rather be like, back alley brawl. But you just select community that you go to. Nobody gonna hurt you. We try
But
to.
there's a flag. People have to learn. We have to learn to start to feel shame as a people, because you can't be sharing all your business in public. And I find people have been doing that too much lately on YouTube. The bedroom business and all things that we don't need to hear. We don't need to hear them talk about that.
Okay.
You understand? If you're coming on a platform, talk knowledge. We don't want to hear all them other things, because I find brothers going too far. They're getting too comfortable. And I want to warn brothers: stop telling your bedroom business. Be careful who you with, because for the past couple of days, you've been hearing too much of that. And some of these women who you're dealing with, who you think is good, is telling all their business. So watch out for some of these women, because they can put you in trouble.
You heard the brother Star.
Indeed.
Right.
Indeed. I wanted to kind of piggyback from some of the like documentation, because I have this saying is, being a scientist, that demonstration beats conversation, right? And that's a modified saying. That's something that Professor Manu and Pym always says, is that documentation beats conversation. And it makes sense for him because he's a historian. I'm a scientist, and so it's all about the experiment and demonstration, right? So I say demonstration beats conversation. But in this case, I'm going to use Professor Manu and Pym's documentation, beats conversation. And like when you're looking and talking about stuff in Europe, like people keep forgetting that Europeans make these writings as well. And you have primary research coming from African people, and you have primary research coming from Europeans and others. And so we're always looking at the quality of the research, and not that it comes from somebody black or it comes from somebody white. And matter of fact, if you know anything about John Henry Clark, he always would tell us to seek out the European scholars who are not afraid to tell the truth, and just based on what the evidence and the data provides. But like this concept, like you hear these oral traditions, especially like amongst the Yoruba folks, that there are some families that that traveled from Meroe and Egypt and settled in the Nile Valley. I mean, settled in the Niger Valley, right? And so you even have texts like this, the Nigerian Prehistory and Archaeology. Thurston Shaw is the editor. And on page 48, 1969, it says, it does seem that at least in part, the Yoruba did have some sort of Sudanic origin and were not originally all forest zone dwellers. Thus, the modern Yoruba are very likely a composite product resulting from the intermixing of people already in the forest with others emanating from the Sudanic zone. So this is a very telling thing unto itself, because it kind of gives you a framework to understand how some of these oral traditions, make it into places like Ghana. Nobody's saying that all Akan people traveled from ancient Egypt and settled in Ghana. That you had certain families or whatnot that have migrated and integrated and intermingled just in the same way that the Asiatics came into Egypt and intermingled with them. In this case, it's just other black folks mingling in with other black folks, right? And then you have, evidence of this, because of course the Egyptians and the Nubians and whatnot who were traveling, they're not traveling on boats, they're not traveling on vehicles, and they have Amazon.com trucks to deliver stuff, right? But what they do have is a skill set. And if anybody knows anything about how traditional Africa works, trade isn't always simply products. Like, people travel just to get initiated into wisdom traditions so that they can bring that knowledge back to their home spot. And they travel all across Africa. This stuff has been going on for years. And
Yeah.
Dr. Kaikosa Kajangu calls this the super African highway of wisdom, right? And so, like, we have this representation coming out of Meroe. And so this is Ghana is Inyakapon, who is viewed as the sun god, as the giver of the sun's fertility, is symbolized by the ram. And of course, we know Amun-Ra was symbolized by the ram in ancient Egypt. And, and you see these particular types of artifacts. And, this looks big on this picture, but this is actually in real life, very, very, very small if you go to the museum and see it. This is from the 25th dynasty, and you know that Amun was dominant in quote unquote Nubia, right? And so when you see certain works, like, there's certain types of designs and things that is like other people in the world is just not going to create on their own, right? Like the Bushmen in the Kalahari are not going to think of independently the Transformers, right? Like the Transformers is a unique, concept that emerges as a result of, automobiles, existence, industrial revolution, and all this stuff has to happen before you can get to the Transformers concept. Right. And if you are, hunter gatherers, you're not thinking about machines, transformers in the way that somebody like in the United States, coming into the 70s and 80s would be thinking about these things. Right. So it's the same thing when it comes to this kind of artwork here. Right. So this is coming from the 25th dynasty. Right, you see these common motifs of the ram's head with this particular, collar that you find basically kind of all over Africa, and with the sun disk or snake over his head. Right, so this is Amun in Nubia, ram-headed Aegis amulet, Nubian Napata period, 743 to 712 BCE. Right, so here's another Nubian artifact around 10 BCE from Queen Amenhotep. was the daughter of a queen and the wife of the brother whom she survived. Her successor was her daughter Amenetorre, who is mentioned in the Bible, right? So this is very unique here because this representation of Amun with the sun disk has cowrie shells at the bottom of the collar. And this is important because what people got to understand is that cowrie shells are not native to West Africa. They got to West Africa because the East Africans, the Sudanese, the ancient Egyptians, and then later on Indians were using the cowrie shells as currency. So as Egyptians and the people in the Sudan were trading with West Africa, they were using cowrie shells. That's how cowrie shells got into West Africa, right? So with that, you have other supporting evidence of these things, right? So this is this is later. This is the Meroitic period. You still see that same type of collars, a different type of head here, but the cowrie shells, right? And this is a source telling you that the cowrie shells came to West Africa from Egypt. So the presence of cowries in Africa could be traced back as early as the 8th century. They came, that means the 700s. So they came from the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean to the West Africa, through North Africa to the Middle Niger in the 11th century, spreading southwards to the Guinea Forest and to the Niger Delta, et cetera, et cetera. And it gives you the different types of cowrie shells. So just more evidence of that. But I wanted to show, this is another necklace where they kind of this is a Nubian necklace showing the kind of the cowries at the bottom and things of this nature. This becomes real important because now you're seeing these Meroitic Egyptian motifs in West Africa. So this is Benin. This isn't Morocco. This isn't Egypt, right? And so the idea that you would have the ram's head associated with these same collars independently in Benin with no interactions with ancient Egyptians and whatnot is far-fetched. And to the point that because they didn't, you can tell that this was done at a time where the cowrie shells hadn't reached this part of West Africa yet. But they still had the memory, those craftsmen that traveled from the Nile Valley, into West Africa, that they still tried to replicate it with these bones here. I mean, these kind of bell-looking shaped things, right? And so this is appended. This is from the 17th, 19th century Edo people among the Yoruba. This is another different representation. So you see they're still trying to substitute at the bottom of the collars here, but still have the rams. Now this is now among the Yoruba folks, right? And I think this is the same pendant. That's a different one, right? So this is a different one. Nigeria, Benin, metal collection number 12351. The U-shape, like these collars here, all African people just didn't independently think of these. These originate in the Nile Valley, right? And so this attachment here with the I don't know if that's supposed to be a sun or a snake or something right here. Like this is the result of craftsmen that traveled, and they used the local materials to recreate as best as they could from memory what was going on in the Nile Valley, right? And so this is the Apapa Horde. This is from the 16th century, I mean the 1500s. And this is located in the British Museum. This is before slavery in the era.
So
right?
I have a question for you, Sar, on that.
Okay.
Is this an indication? Yeah, I have a question. Is this an indication that the people are bringing the ideology of the Nile Valley cultures and civilization, or are you just saying that it's just the artists bringing the craft without a necessary connection with what they represented? Did you find that they used the language and called this Amun, for example?
Well, we don't know necessarily what because remember these were created. This was created in the 1500s. This one right here. One was the other day given. This one's the 1600s to the 1800s, right? Mm-hmm. One that they gave was like from hold on, let me see. It doesn't give a date on this one. But yes, I need to find a date. So what I'm saying is that what they particularly called it has been lost.
Okay.
Because remember, the slave trade and all this is happening now. So there was a major disruption in these types of creations, like the bronze heads and all of that was going on, you know, by in a Noke, all of that, like that's been discontinued. So you don't have those people recreating these anymore.
I see.
So you got to look at other aspects, and we also got to remember that in ancient Egypt, we're looking some 2,000, 3,000 years later, looking at all the evidence at once and assuming that everything was connected and intact instead of localized in various different places.
So some of those are actually basically modern pieces then. Those are not, or all of those are not ancient pieces then?
No, the latest of these is
17th
this
century.
one.
19th.
This is 1600s, between 1600 and 1800s.
Wow.
So there's no Egyptology here. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
There's there could not have been no Egyptologist that showed them a book and the ancient and then the Yoruba people and the Benin people recreated these from looking at ancient Egyptian monuments and things.
That is interesting. I thought those were ancient pieces. I didn't know that those were modern pieces.
But that
this is from the 1500s.
Yeah, but then my question is, could that be the people that left, that migrated from Kemet and went west, and they brought? Is it just that the artisans were going back and forth and picking up the talent, the skills to make these items, or is it the people themselves coming with that memory as well as the skill? I guess that's what I'm asking. Okay.
Exactly, because there was a like in the Bible they were called Kenites. Okay. And there were some Kenites, and they still go by that name in Nigeria to this day. They're a guild of metallurgists. So metallurgists would travel and utilize their skills. Like they wouldn't be carrying. You can't carry on a donkey or like large things of metal, right? Yeah. So they created there and stuff, there, right? So when they came to places like Benin, Cameroon, Nigeria, they had like their own guild. So like there's certain aspects of wisdom traditions that are foreign, that are now just kind of integrated in the system that already exists, if that makes sense.
I believe,
right?
I think I understand you to say that the craftsmen brought the craft, and there were the people, they brought it to a place of people that didn't necessarily have those skills before. And so I got that part.
Exactly.
But I'm asking,
like, so I understand what you're asking in terms of, did they bring like the religion? Did they bring a moon? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
we're assuming, see, this is the thing. We're assuming that, you know, they had a concept of a moon necessarily in a very deity focus, like, and I'm trying to articulate this in a way that Dr. Kipkuich Sambu said on my podcast when I interviewed him. So he wrote 2 books talking about the collagen's ancient Egyptian origin, right? And one of the questions that I asked him was something similar to what you just asked me. And he was like, although in the text and things you see certain things personified, amongst the people it may not have been personified, but the concept itself is what reigned. Like, we're looking at tools of pedagogy that people weren't walking around talking about ISIS, this, you know, Amun Ra, that, da 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 da. The words exist in their language. They know what the words mean, so they just use the words in the everyday context.
Yes.
Right. While they may choose one deity. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're connecting everything 3,000 years later because we have all the artifacts. But when it's localized, the patron deity just may be Isis itself and not any other deities.
I understand. They got a fragment of
You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, they got a fragment
exactly.
of a bigger thing.
But it was never a complete system. It's always fragmented. It's even like that in Yoruba land right now. Like, you'll talk to one Yoruba Babalawo, and he'll give you some information. You go 50 miles south and they do something totally differently, where it may be a Batala is the supreme, you know, in that area, and then when you go 50 miles south, he's just a subordinate deity to Olorun, or they might big up Oduduwa. You know, saying here they may not even worship Oshun in this place, but you know, Oshun is the main deity in this other place in Nigeria. Like, these modern borders and big, like we have to totally rethink how we think about Africa. That's part of this discussion, and part of the things that it's kind of hard to chip away because, you know, of the times we live in and the lens, right?
I like the way
so like with this, with this, I'm sorry.
But to understand that Africa only ever had one culture. It's just expressed many different ways. I don't think Africa is a multicultural society. That is why they understand each other. There's always ever been one concept.
No, it's very much multicultural, and it's like that's a lazy way that we've mistakenly done in the past.
Can I?
Because there's certain things that, you know, because certain lifestyles require you to live and perceive things differently. Like the people in the forest, like the Batwa people in the forest don't see the world and operate the same like the Maasai do, or the Nier and the Dinka, right? They're different groups, different worldviews. And it's a disservice to do lazy scholarship and just assume that everybody was the same and that we can just use one culture and interpret the other. You still have to do your due diligence in the same way that you would have to distinguish a European from an African. It's the same thing when you're talking about Africa in itself. Matter of fact, this is something, because I entered my studies through Yoruba studies. Like, I formerly took Yoruba studies in college, right? Even the language and things. So when you're looking at African culture and things, you're looking at it like the Yoruba people. But then you come to find out that most of the folks don't think like the Yoruba people. Matter of fact, the Yoruba people operate in their religious context in the minority. Like most African people don't have a large pantheon of deities like the Yoruba people do, and the ancient Egyptians. Like you go amongst the Bantu speaking people, you don't find these long lists of deities and priesthoods under these deities that you got to worship and the like. It's totally different.
Right.
And so you got to respect each individual group as autonomous unto themselves. And then once you start grasping better knowledge of other groups and you notice the differences, then you can kind of cluster certain people together and find those commonalities. But to argue that it's just one culture, that's not true at all.
But let me explain what I mean. Like for
hold
example,
on 1 second, because I thought I heard someone come in and I have my screen big so I can't see. So we got brother Zoo 221 in the building.
Peace, family.
Peace, Zoo.
So can I explain?
And,
I mean,
Jose, Assad, I'm loving this conversation y'all having, man. This is a great conversation.
Can I explain?
Indeed.
Sorry, before you beat me up again.
Go ahead.
My view is that basically ancestor worship is basically the one commonality that they all have. Maybe they express it differently, because we realize that some of these deities were actually the ancestors that they deified. We can say that. Maybe not all of them, because we don't really know. But at least Asar, they said they think might have been a real person, and they can explain Asar as possibly being an ancestor. So that's what I mean. I mean, that is just a commonality. If I'm wrong, correct me, because I don't speak the language and I'm not as learned as you.
I think I understand you, Jose. Asar, I think what he said is kind of like what Job did in 74. He said, okay, we're African. And he said, and all of us are African. And I can show you through these, 9 or 11 or 14 categories, where wherever you go, we have these very similar ways of doing things that are African, even though you do it in different regions, right? And just some are sand dwellers, some are forest dwellers, some live by the rivers, etc. So that's what you're saying, Jose, is that yes.
I understand exactly what he's saying, and I'm saying it's very problematic. And again, I'm coming from a scholarly standpoint. And this is something that I actually disagree with, for example, with Dr. Molefe Kiti Asante, because like in his text, what he would always teach us is that it's one African philosophy, one African culture. And I'm like, you can't do that, because you're trying to make a distinction. Like, how should I say this? Like Europeans, we have a way of thinking about European people, and we think that they're just totally opposite from African people. Now we have political reasons for having that particular perspective, but as someone who also studies indigenous European religion and culture, there is a lot that is the same. They worship their ancestors. They worship nature. You know, it looks different now because of the advent of Christianity and how it was spread. But if you look at their indigenous, they're doing the same things. And so by that logic, they're practicing African religion, but y'all not going to give them African religion. Y'all gonna be like, no, that's not us. They do something different. You're going to try to find some way to make a distinction.
You're right. I'm not giving it to them. You're right. You're right. Not at all.
Exactly. So we got to remember that, you know.
That point. So you're completely at odds with the elder Dr. Cheese with his sand people, sun people, ice people origin.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name.
Dr. Leonard Jeffries, who is sand people, sun people, sun people, ice people, and how the environment caused certain evolutionary traits through the different human beings, right, that cause them to be certain ways. So no, they're not African ways of doing things with the European. I think you're being generous to juvenile delinquents who, by their behavior and history that you already documented, in it earlier in your presentation when you talked about, once again, the Asiatics coming in contact and seemingly assimilating with the Nile Valley culture, but not actually accepting the culture. Because if they did, they would have been in harmony and they would have became part of the culture as opposed to being the people who would bring chaos and insight into the culture.
But this is how I would answer this. So again, I've learned a lot from our elders, and I understand the perspective and what they were trying to accomplish with their arguments. But as a scholar and as a scientist, I always tell folks I'm not loyal to any person. I only have one obligation and loyalty, and that's to the truth. Regardless to how it may make us look, it may make us feel, or regardless, right? And to an extent, I can agree with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, but this isn't an issue of race, because we can't argue on one hand that race is a social construct and then try to make arguments based upon biological races and attach certain behaviors and things to it. Because when you do that, you open the gates for them to be like, well, y'all didn't accomplish this in the modern age. That's because your biology, and your melanin is preventing you from being able to grasp concepts like quantum mechanics or whatever, yada yada yada. So what other stupidness that somebody can come up with. But that's not the case. But one of the things that I have been researching over the years, and it's a text that I'm preparing to write, titled "Religious Proselytization as a Form of Violence." Yes. The use of the African or the violation of the concept of the African concept of simultaneous validity, right? And one of the
break that down. Validity.
Well, simultaneous validity is the notion that all cultures, ideas, or unto themselves legitimately valid, important, and unto themselves in terms of the agency of themselves. And so we got this concept from the late Jordan Ngubani in his text, Conflict of Minds, right? And what happens in, usually in the European construct, is that they want to put hierarchy, on the value of people and human ideas, to where, of course, they put themselves at the highest, and then, of course, the African at the lowest. While the African is saying that everybody's, existence and essence is simultaneously valid.
Yes.
And there's no hierarchy in this sense, right?
Yes.
Now we can fluctuate in terms of when we start getting into the philosophy of ethics and the like, but that's taking it into a different discussion. But in the text that I'm writing, I'm using the model of what they call the culture of honor. And if you know anything about cultures of honor tend to be more violence prone than other groups of people. And they typically are nomadic pastoralists who live in marginalized environments that don't have many resources, and they don't have like central governments and law.
Yes.
And so no matter what the particular quote unquote race is in the world, people who have this particular lifestyle tend to behave in very similar ways. And so whether we're talking about the nomadic hordes of the Indo-Europeans, whether you're talking about the Han Dynasty folks, whether you're talking about the Habarus, the Fulani,
Would
the
you
college.
classify the Japanese as like a culture of honor? The
Yes.
samurai.
Yes.
I-
Yes.
So these are folks that have settled down, and so they're very offensive. So like one of the characteristics of these groups is that the warrior is is validated higher than everyone else, right?
Mhm.
And that these people are always ready to fight because of the lifestyle that they live. So think about it like this: if you're a nomadic pastoralist and you are guiding sheep, cows, bulls, goats, or whatnot, animals that are very vulnerable to attacks from top tier predators, you have to 24/7 always be on your guard to
Yeah.
fight against alligators, lions, tigers, bears, wolves, hyenas, all of these top-notch predators in the world, right? So you have to have a certain type of temperament. And that's why in these particular societies, the warriors are on top, not the elders, not the wise folks, because they're seen as weak,
Yes.
right? And
So how would you see Kemet? Would they be like a composite kind of society where they like kind of
mixed.
both, or
Yeah, they're kind of both. And so that's why you have the leaders always in bulls and in using bull symbolism, and always war. You see that their leadership is based upon their ability to trample over the enemies and like this, because part of their development was coming from these nomadic pastoralists who used to travel through the Sahara and the like, right? And so it's kind of mixed, but then you have this kind of agricultural stick to it, and that's what allows them to have the great philosophies and stuff that we learn, right?
I was
But
about to
there's still
say, the Geru Ma'at tradition, and the whole Geru tradition in Kemet. It manifests in Senegal, in among the Wolof as something called Gor, and among the Fulani as Godu. But it means like, honorable man, and scholars have called it like a system of honor. You know what I mean? And it's kind of become like interchangeable with the term Chedo. And you've probably seen the movie Chedo, Usman Semben. You know, if not, it's like they're like a resistant group, but they kind of went from a group, a word describing people who are on the outskirts, but who work for the king, who likely detain like some kind of mystical knowledge, but ended up becoming soldiers and really kind of like gangsters, at the end of the day, by the time the slave trade got in full swing, but it's really interesting to hear that perspective and align that with the term kind of God a little bit. I don't know if you're taking it all the way through that, if you see it in the Geru Ma'a tradition.
Can I pose a question?
One strong way that they define Geru
Ma'a.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
Well, one strong way that they define Geru Ma'a in the Senegambia, right, as Gor, right, is one who basically one who is not subjugated by colonialism, who fights for his freedom, almost like a samurai, people who even commit suicide on the battlefield if it was a chance that they would lose, kind of thing. That's the kind of folklore that surrounds them. So it makes me wonder if that was a development that was just in West Africa because of the conditions, whether it's something that started in the Nile Valley, or if it didn't exist in the Nile Valley at all and just kind of transformed, you know, on the West Coast.
I want to read this, and of course I have other supporting texts and studies on this, but you know, this is, I was introduced to this book, The Culture of Honor by Malcolm Gladwell, in his text, The Outliers, right? And but this is what this text, Culture of Honor, the Psychology of Violence in the South meaning the United States, right? And so herding, and so there's a section in there called Herding and the Uses of Warfare. So people who herd animals usually live in places such as mountains, semi-deserts, and steppes, where because of the ecology, crop farming is inadequate to provide for basic food needs. They have little surplus and sometimes experience genuine want. Thus, they are often tempted to take the herds of other groups. As a consequence, theft and raiding are endemic to pastoral peoples. Or, as one herdsman of the Middle East put it, raids are our culture. So notice this line here. Or, as one herdsman of the Middle East put it, raids are our culture. So for Brother Flag, remember in the presentation when I was reading the Asiatics, they raid have been doing violence for thousands of years.
Yes.
Right? Because raiding is our culture.
I'm not sure if you watch Gnostic Informant at all, but they just did a video, and they were talking about I think the Kali goddess of war in India. I could have the name wrong.
That's the right one. Yes.
Man, it was deep though, you know, and it's and this kind of goes back to the topic you guys were saying before. I'm gonna try to make it short, but you know, I'm watching these guys and they're having these conversations about these different deities, you know, all through the West, really, you know, Europe and in Asia, like Dionysus and Mithras and Kali. And one could be mistaken to think that these dudes are talking about like just some mythical gods or something, but it's really, you're talking about like the development of society, the development of ideas, the development of logic, you know, and values.
Exactly. And this is what this text gets into, and I want to continue this part right here.
Go ahead, for sure.
So it says, thus, skill at warfare is valuable to a herdsman in a way that is not to a hunter-gatherer or farmer. It is no accident that it is the herding peoples of Europe who have been reputed to be the best soldiers over the centuries. That to the Scots, as to the Swiss, the Swedes, Albanians, Prussians, and other peoples of Europe's margins and infertile uplands. War has been something of a national industry. In addition to the marginal Northern Europeans, many, if not most, Mediterranean groups, including the traditional cultures of such peoples as the Andalusians of southern Spain, the Corsicans, the Sardinians, the Druids, the Bedouins, Kabyle of Algeria, the Sarakatsani, if I'm saying that correctly, of Greece, are all characterized as holding these as a version of the culture of honor. These groups all have economics that are greatly dependent on herding. Many other traditional societies of Africa and the steppes of Eurasia and North America also have or had herding economies and cultures of honor. An even better natural experiment came with the introduction of the horse in the American Indians of the plains. Prior to the arrival of the horse, the tribes of the plains had been relatively peaceful. After its introduction, many tribes began to behave like herders everywhere. They reckon their wealth in terms of the number of horses they own. They stage raids on their neighbors, and they begin to glorify warfare, right? And these are the different things. Like I'll read this one thing, and then I'll stop here. So this is coming race and identity in the Nile Valley, ancient and modern perspectives. And in it is talking about these nomadic pastoral groups in East Africa, right? So, in more specifically in the Sudan. So it says the four major pastoral groups in southern Sudan include the Dinka, the Nuer, the Atuat, and the Merle. According to their oral histories, since the 18th century, these groups have raided each other for cattle and women. Like most pastoral lineage societies around the world, raiding for animals and people is a time-honored activity. Almost all customary rob and pillage their pastoral neighbors, for to continue long in a state of peace diminishes their wealth. Thus, war and plunder become necessary. For example, the Dinka philosophy historically has been that many wives shall bring forth many daughters who shall be married with great numbers of cattle, right? There has been a lot of raiding for greed. It has always been important to show we are good warriors, and when you are strong and you go and rob the weak. It was the formula for those days, and everybody did it. If you defeated another clan, you took their cows and women. We took the women to become wives, while young girls could be married to other men and bring more cows. Small boys could raid for more cattle. Paul Lovejoy terms these pastoral practices as lineage slavery. He reasons that children abducted in raids are forcibly cut off from kin, and that their property elements, the alien identity, the role of violence, and the productive and sexual exploitation of human beings is always present in pastoral raiding systems. This is not entirely correct in the case of the Dinka and Nuer, however, for kin are not always cut off, quote unquote, and numbers have returned to their own families in later years, particularly when it became time to get married. The nature of pastoral raiding in these societies took a turn for the worse with the arrival of a new group of pastoralists to the north, right? And I'll end it there. But the point is being that a lot of these attitudes and practices people are trying to say is European, and that they get this stuff from European and Arabs, and it's not the case. It just depends on the group. That's what I'm saying. You can't lump all Africans the same. Certain ways and lifestyles, cultivate different types of attitudes, values, and the like. And pastoral groups, like these are the Nubian folks that the ancient Egyptians were always battling and raiding with, because they would come into Egypt and raid for Egyptians' cattle and things. We
And
even have
to that point, they were expert horsemen.
Okay. Two or three things. One, when you talk about race, there's only one race, and that's the human race. While I can't put up slides like you do, I can utilize these slides that you put up to voice my point. And my point was when Dr. Jeffries, with his theory, the sand people, the sun people, and the ice people. This is over I'm talking about hundreds of millions, hundreds of thousands of years. So don't get me wrong. Not trying to be adversarial with you, Asar. I know better than that. But what I'm trying to do is share some insights that came to me that Malefia Santi seems to be operating on, that Job seems to be operating on, and Dr. Jeffries operating on. And it's a distinction between those who know of Ma'at in some way, form, of Ma'at, and operate with that knowledge to align themselves with that. That is a focal point or a characteristic that I might point to say that makes you African, as opposed to the others where where you talked about these other societies who honored their soldiers because they protected everything. Is that an honor society? The honor society, you're talking about an individual relationship with the universe, with the deity. And so those two distinctive relationships with nature with reality cause people to act in two diametrically opposed opposite ways, even though they might have certain cultural practices that are similar when you pointed to the Europeans' funeral practices that may mirror something that was going on the continent. But I agree, just for these things that you showed about the people living in certain types of environments causes them to be something, when you have the hunters and the farmers are going to always be at odds. Well, they're going to always be at odds in Mali, in the Malian Empire. I can give you an example. They have the thing. You ever heard of the hunter's oath?
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay, I wish I could pull it up. The hunter's oath, where they had lost their relationship. The people of the Mali, after Mansa Musa made his trek and all that, there came a period where the people that lived in Mali, where the hunter group was taking advantage of the farmer group raiding like that. And so then when the Muslims, when the Arab traders came in, then they became slave traders, right? At a certain period, after a certain period of time, I forgot, it was several hundred years, they saw the effect on their whole region. And so the hunters took this oath to say that they would no longer raid the pastoral people, the farmers' areas, that they would use their skills to protect them so that no African would be a slave, that no African would any longer be a slave and suffer the indignity of wretchedness that comes from being hungry. That was the hunter's oath that was taken, and this was in the 14th or 15th century. And I tried to connect that with the South African, the Zulu Declaration. You know about the Zulu Declaration of Sovereignty, Asar?
I know the Zulu Declaration of being human. That's in that's Jordan Ngubani. That was the affirmation from his family.
Okay,
so
I understood that was well understood, practiced. Yes, no, maybe
not necessarily. See, that's what I mean. Like a lot of what we're thinking of in religion, like we think of religion in the same way that the Abrahamic people practice it.
No, okay.
But
well, I'm
certain
trying
things were family,
yes,
like passed down through families, individually. Like you may have had some aspects that was shared with the culture, but most of that is families, like certain deities, because they're relatives, right?
That's how
that's
how it got to us today as scientists and historians. That's how it got to us. But I'm imagining it, and maybe you're going to tell me I'm completely bonkers for doing this. I imagine that it came from something, and if one person had it, the community had it, or an aspect of it. And I'm trying to connect those two things with the principle of Ma'at that reigned for over 3,000-4,000 millennium, right?
But note that the Dinka have Ma'at too. They just call it Ching, but they still do the rating. It's called Ching. And they still do the rating because, just like the collagen folks, the collagen have Ma'at. They have the word Ma'at, everything that's associated with Ma'at in the collagen group. But they are still a nomadic pastoralist group who raid others. Like this concept of being African is modern. There's no concept of African indigenous on the continent where they see each other as brothers and sisters.
Understood.
It's your tribe is your nation. That's who you focus. So these concepts of like Ma'at and Ching was internally valid, but they didn't apply that always to others. And that's what I'm trying to say here. Like it's a lot deeper, and we got to be careful and try to get away from trying to lump all African people in the same boat, and understand that Africa and an African is an idea to be realized. We haven't gotten there yet. But
I just wanted to add to that.
I gotta get up at 4:30.
But
What'd you say?
I'm sorry. I'm saying I didn't realize the time is 12:14 and I got to get up at 4:30.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I'm saying so I'll let Zoo 22 end with his commentary, and then I'm gonna end the show.
Well, I was gonna say that I wouldn't say that necessarily, you know, they didn't have, because the thing is about context, right? You know, there were systems, like for instance in Senegal, there's something called the Khet, and the Khet is a matrilineal uh line of kinship, and it's the widest form of kinship. And in that form of kinship, there's biological kin, there's non-biological kin, and there's just different kinds of people, but it's still a valid form of kinship that exists among maybe 4 other categories. You see what I'm saying? So that is a category that goes across different tribes, but of course Africa's big as crap. So
You
you know
don't
what I mean?
realize how vast Africa is, and
You
with
know what I
it
mean?
being the
So,
home of humanity,
but we
and
can
we're
build
talking
on
about
those.
the evolution of humanity over 2 million years. In
Yes.
terms of Homo sapien sapien, you're talking about 300,000 to 400,000 years of development and differentiation and diversity. So we got to be careful in terms of these lumpings, and not do the lazy stuff that Europeans did in the 18th and 19th.
And actually there's value in the differentiation, right? Or in the distinction, because in the different, just like for instance the story of Brer Rabbit that you find in Senegal, you find it, you know, all over the Niger and the Senegal River, and you find it here in the States and in the diaspora. Is you find the same story sometime, right? But with certain small variations, you know what I mean? Certain different expressions that are reflected because of a different environment, different pressures, different things that were going on. So the same thing happens, I think, with these religions on one side, you know what I mean? But I don't want to. I could keep talking for this all night, so you
I
know.
appreciate you, brothers. Appreciate you, Star. Nice to meet you, Zoo. Jose, I really appreciate you guys. You're very stimulating and give me something to think about.
All right. All right. Have a good night, eh?
Good night, fellas.
Good night, peace, brother Flag and Jose. Assad, thanks for letting me on. Peace.
Thanks, Azar. I'm out.
I appreciate each and every one of you in the audience for listening, and I look forward to y'all collective feedback on the presentation. And hopefully I'll do it earlier some other time. So if we do it after show, we can go as long and as necessary as possible. So y'all continue to be safe. Make sure that you subscribe, so when I upload a new video, y'all will be the first to know. And with that, we are out. Peace.